Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversants are Lynn, Chadwick, and Kathleen Dooley, who are founding members of Themis, which is a nonprofit organization focused on raising funds and providing support to detransitioners who are pursuing lawsuits against their medical providers. In this conversation, we talk about the Byzantine structure that is the American legal system, especially with regard to medical malpractice lawsuits, and the different mechanisms at play when these detransitioners go up against their medical providers and insurance companies and hospitals and so on and so forth. It's very fascinating stuff, and it's enlightening too. If you think that Lawfare is just going to solve this, it might be one way in which the medical industry will be held to account, but it's not going to be an easy path. Themis is also spearheading a fundraiser to help me with a project I'm working on, translating all of my detransitioner interviews into a book that can provide more insight and awareness about the detransitioner struggle. If you are interested in supporting either of my projects or Themis's projects, links to those are down there in the description. Without further ado, here is Kathleen Dooley and Lynn Chadwick.
The reason that we formed Themis is because at this point in time, it's become very obvious to most of us that have been around this issue for a bit of time that we have a medical scandal of epic proportions. And we don't even know how many young people and families and the ripples this is destroying people's lives, many lives. And it's a medical scandal. And it's also become very obvious to me and to a lot of people that there is no shortage of documentation of what's going on. Seems like the focus for a while has been on writing articles, doing studies, doing podcasts, producing information. And we're producing information that the majority of the American public never gets to read or watch or hear about. And I know that you know that because, you're putting out this information and the same people watch it all the time. And the people who refuse to listen to it are the people who could actually do something about it. So we have several examples, for example, of the American Academy of Pediatrics steadfastly refusing to listen to any sort of data, information they don't want to hear. And most recently, the big examples have been the WPATH files and the Cass report. This is documentation of a scandal and documentation that gender affirming care has limited to no good solid evidence of the efficacy and a lot of evidence that there's dangerous harms being committed here. I think it was Laura Edwards Leeper that referred to it as sloppy care. I mean, it's well documented, but no one wants to listen. Now, so something has to happen. And personally, I think a lot of people are beginning to agree that the only way forward in the US is lawsuits. I don't think anyone is going to listen until there are legal judgments and people start losing large amounts of money. So this needs to happen. But the problem is that lawsuits are extremely expensive. They're extremely difficult. And at this point in time, for a lot of reasons, and I'm going to let Kathleen elaborate on those a little bit later on, but I started talking to attorneys and I said, would it help if someone gave you money? They said, yeah, that would help a lot. And so I decided that we would start a fund and we would fund litigation. And so that's mostly what we're doing is just we're funding. We're funding lawyers, we're funding litigation, we're paying for expert witnesses. We're going to help pay for these things so that they get done.
Mm-hmm. Why is it, Kathleen, could you give some insight? And I know it's an incredibly complex and Byzantine structure, the law is, but why is this so difficult and so expensive to do
It's a
these
good
lawsuits?
question. It's many states have requirements before a medical malpractice lawsuit can be filed. Among other things, states require that an expert report be attached to the complaint, affirming that there was a breach in any applicable standard of care. And so that's expensive. Experts are very expensive. They want thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands, to draft that kind of opinion. And in some states, it has to be in the form of an affidavit. So it's a sworn statement. And so it has to be very carefully crafted because that statement is going to become the subject of an extensive deposition of that expert. And every word in that affidavit is shark bait, okay, for a defense lawyer. And so you want to be careful that you have the right expert to do this, and you have to have the money to do this, and you have to make sure that everything is complying with the applicable state law on that kind of document. There are other states that say you don't have to have that document, but you do have to, the plaintiff's lawyer, have to affirm that you will have an expert who will testify to the breach in the standard of care. So that's expensive, just getting that off the ground. The other part of the expense is gathering all the medical records and having someone knowledgeable about medical records and the language that doctors use in the records to comb through them and to try to, nail all the places where the standard of care was breached. So you either, many law firms hire paralegals who have been in the healthcare field that can even read doctors' handwriting if it's handwritten. And so you've got to pay them to do that too. And then the drafting of the complaint is a laborious process. It's not a cookie cutter type thing, especially with this cohort. This is a completely different type of medical malpractice. It's not, you operated on the wrong lung. It's completely different. And everybody's circumstances, while there may be a lot of similarities, there are a lot of differences too. And so you also are working with young people who have been traumatized. And so you have to make sure that they have a level of support that they need to get them through litigation, because litigation is war, and it's bloody, and it's protracted. It doesn't go away in a year. There are some dockets that might be called rocket dockets, but for the most part, these cases are going to get dragged out over a couple of years. And so we're dealing with young people who are not sophisticated purchasers of legal services. And so the lawyer has to take the time, spend the time with that person to explain, here's the process, here how it will unfold all the way through. And so just getting the case off the ground could easily be a six-figure amount, easily. Mm-hmm. And so many attorneys are reluctant to do that because this is a new kind of case, right? It's one thing if you do medical malpractice like my father did for years on the plaintiff's side, where this is how it goes, right? But here it's different. You've got, it's almost like a politicized issue too, but it's complex, and there are lawyers who are not willing to take the risk of a loss. And so,
not just financial. I mean, there's got to be reputational, and political things down the line.
And then I've spoken to some lawyers to see, we try to enlist attorneys to work with us. And I've been told I would love to help, but I will lose a client base. There will be clients that walk out because they don't agree with this kind of thing, because they have a different mindset. All right. So now you have issue conflict. All right. And so it's not just client, it's issue conflict. So it's really difficult. And if any attorneys are watching this, we encourage you to step up and work with us, because there are a lot of people out there seeking legal representation.
Yes. I said the word Byzantine, but there's so many different moving parts to this particular lawsuit. You said, so it's very particular and it lacks precedent.
Yeah.
So what are like the lay of the land, whose hat is in the ring when a lawsuit, who's being sued? How is that? Where's the money coming from the other side, from the doctors, from the insurance, from the medical associations? Like, who is being sued, and what kind of power and resources do they have?
Well, the doctors are being sued, the doctors who perform surgeries, the doctors who, or the healthcare providers that provide the wrong sex hormones, the psychotherapists who encourage these young people to take this path. In one case that we have up in Rhode Island, they're suing the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the doctors, one doctor in particular who drafted the AAP's position on this, was actually the doctor that treated this particular plaintiff. So he's the architect of the document, and I think he was a resident at the time, back in 2018. So they're being sued as well. There is a lot of money if these healthcare providers are being insured and covered in the representation. Typically what happens, the doctor gets a claim against him or her, contacts the insurance company. The insurance company, if it falls within the definition of a medical incident, as that term is defined in any given policy, and not all policies are identical, so that's important. And then the insurance company will typically say, here's your lawyer. We already have a panel of lawyers that work on these cases, so this is your lawyer. And then that lawyer gets paid by the insurance company. So that lawyer doesn't have to worry. That lawyer's going to send the bills out every month, and the lawyer's going to get paid. Yeah. And then if there's a judgment against the doctor and it still falls within the policy language, then the insurance company will foot the bill on the judgment. So the money's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one other question. So it seems to one of the most important aspects of this is what a standard of care is. Is that what's being fought over or fought through? Because
I think both.
If AAP can define the standards of care to cover their own asses, so to speak, then they don't have to worry about that. So you would have to actually attack the standards of care. But on the other hand, how does a standard of care interact with the court or interact with this process?
If the court accepts a certain standard of care, that's the standard of care. Okay, like in medical malpractice cases, typically the judges know what the standard of care is. It's been articulated in the expert's report that's attached to the complaint, something like that. This is going to be interesting because WPATH has something called the standard of care, which are not standards of care. But if you call something long enough, people start to believe it. But I think that's being dismantled as we speak. And so this is going to be the challenge, I think, for the plaintiff's attorneys in articulating the applicable standard of care, which is why they need the experts. The experts have to say to them, okay, I'm an expert in this field, or endocrinology, whatever you want to call it, right? And let me tell you, this is what should be done with this kind of patient, with any patient that's going to be put on these drugs. And the same thing with the surgeon. You're going to need surgeons. Right? Is it appropriate for a surgeon to remove bodily parts of a mentally distressed individual? Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that will come to the fore.
Right. I just wanted to comment. Part of what makes this such a circus is that we can see there aren't any standards of care, not really. And I mean, I'm a medical person. We had standards of care. They were in a book, and it said, this is what you do. And if you varied from that, then you were liable. You were guilty of not performing the care that any reasonable person would provide. Some of us saw it during the WPATH Files videos. They're making it up as they go along. And I know that Scott Nugent was told, you can't sue because it's experimental. There's no standards of care, so we don't have anything to sue against. It's very slippery. And I kind of think they want it that way.
Wait, so if there's no standards of care, then you don't have a reasonable claim to be cared for?
One could argue that, but I say let's go back and look at how the law has evolved over the years. Yeah. And I'll take products liability as an example. For years, when someone was injured by a product, the only thing that the courts would look at was the Uniform Commercial Code on warranties, implied warranty of merchantability. But as time went on and products were becoming more dangerous, a new body of law emerged called products liability. And then from products liability, we also had strict liability. Like if the product itself is just dangerous in and of itself, you're strictly liable for it. So that took a while to catch on.
I'm sorry, who is liable for it? Just to
The
be clear, like
manufacturer
if
who designed an
Okay.
inherently dangerous product is probably going to be held strictly liable. Okay, under the theory of strict liability, there's negligent product and strict liability. And so, because intellectual property has evolved, there was never such a thing for the longest time as an intellectual property right. Well, that is now a right, all right, that's protected. So the law is capable of evolving over the years and accommodating changes in circumstances. And that's why I think that's where we are right here. We are here in a position of being able to formulate a new standard of care, because this has never been in the history of mankind has this kind of thing happened to so many young people.
And never before in history have non-medical activists drafted medical standards of care, which is what we've seen happening here. With no evidential base underneath them. That's really problematic.
That's another moving piece of this, the entire conversation. But when we get into the law aspect of it, there's this concept of rights, and people have the right to something, right? And this is how the activists, by using the language of rights, civil rights, protecting people, protected classes and stuff. So they're leaning on kind of this national moral tendency to view these protected classes or the downtrodden as somebody who needs to be protected. So how does that interact? If somebody's trans and they have the right to become trans or to be transed by the doctor, does that complicate the issue with regard to standards of care? Is standards of care sitting or laying against one's right to this medical practice and this ability to express themselves in the way that they want to, and then regret that or not regret it?
I don't know if anyone has a right to bad, non-evidenced medical care just because they want it. Medical care isn't like going into a restaurant and ordering what you want because that's what you desire. Medical care should be done based upon scientific knowledge, disease, healing, and a basis of scientific understanding and evidence. And as we see, given the Cass report, if you even a cursory reading, you can see that we don't have that evidential base. And the standards, the WPATH standards were just written on idealism, not science. There's no science there. So I disagree that people have a right to live their lives however they want to, but I don't know that we all have a right to demand whatever healthcare procedures we desire. That's actually called cosmetic elective care. And those things typically aren't covered by insurance. They're not referred to as life-saving. They're not defended in the media as something that you can't have any kind of a problem with. And so the problem, in my view, is that I'm not recommending that we outlaw everything and refuse to do any of these procedures. I'm just saying they're elective.
And also, when you're talking about the patient-doc-physician relationship and the care that's to be rendered, there's this concept of something called informed consent. Mm-hmm. And in each one of these cases, there was no informed consent because they were told everything's going to be great. This is going to cure all your mental health problems when the mental health problems haven't been addressed. So how can that be informed consent? How can somebody who's not mentally in their right mind at the moment make such a life-altering decision to chemically alter their body or surgically alter their body in an irreversible way. That is not informed consent. And the same thing applies to parents of minors, right? They weren't told, minors who have also gone through this. Parents are told certain things, and they're not even given fully informed consent because they don't know the long-term implications. Nobody's talking to them about really how this is going to change that child's body, how that child will not go through puberty if puberty blockers are prescribed, how that child will be sterilized. And a 14-year-old is going to say, I don't want kids. Well, what 14-year-old is really capable of making such a decision at the end of the day? So that's a really important concept in when it comes to medical malpractice. Was the patient fully informed at the time this treatment was being recommended?
And are minors capable of making informed decisions? I guess I'm just recapitulating that too. Like, does the law regard minors as a special class of person?
Yes. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Yeah, but I really passionately believe that adults deserve evidence-based quality care every bit as much as minors do. So when we narrow our focus down to only minors, why is it that we don't care about the adults as well? We should, every bit as much. Now, given, of course, minors are much less capable of understanding this, but you need to provide evidence-based quality care to everybody, adults, minors, everyone. There's nobody that deserves this misrepresentation at all. And then let's talk about discrimination. So another way of looking at this, and you can explain that, I'm sure, much better than I can, Kathleen, but there is some discrimination direction that is being taken as well.
Yes, it's it's staying away from the medical malpractice aspect, and it's going right to the heart of the anti-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Care Act. Among other things, sexual identity is protected. And so when you have a patient in, let's say, a federally funded hospital who presents as mentally distressed with internalized homophobia, but really is gay, and you don't address those issues, instead you, as they put it, trans away the gay, you have violated the anti-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Care Act. That would also take a case outside of the medical malpractice coverage.
Okay.
Right? So that's a very interesting, we have one of those cases up in Massachusetts federal court, and I can tell you that more are coming.
Yeah. So can we do a case study just to kind of take all the ideas that we're talking about and show how they played out in a case and what that involved, what that showed, what happened?
Well, there's only one case that is procedurally moving forward. All right. So the complaint has been filed. The answers have been filed by the defendants. And then the defendants also filed a motion to dismiss. And in this particular case, the case contained medical malpractice claims. So those are claims of negligence against the doctors and the healthcare providers, the therapists. But it also contained claims of fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, unfair and deceptive trade practices. I haven't seen the order signed by the judge yet, but I do know the outcome. I just have a good picture of the outcome and I was also at the oral argument. And so the medical malpractice claims were dismissed, and not because they lacked merit. They were dismissed because there's something called the statute of repose. The defendants also argued the statute of limitations, which is much shorter. I think it was about 3 years, but the statute of repose in this case was 4 years. The statute of repose, it's not in every state, but it basically gives anybody, especially in this case, the medical field, some peace of mind knowing that they're not going to get sued after 4 years. And so it basically shuts down any attempt to try to sue them for negligence. And so that's why those claims were tossed. The fraud claims, however, and the conspiracy to commit fraud and the unfair deceptive trade practice, those claims are in. So the ball is in play in this particular case. In other cases, they haven't proceeded that far yet, at least the ones that we're funding. So I know another one was, they can be thrown out on a technicality, has nothing to do with the merits of the case. But this is a case where the court has basically said, move ahead, litigate.
So just to clarify, a doctor can be negligent and after 4 years, they can't be held responsible. But if they commit something called fraud or conspiracy to commit fraud, there's no statute of limitation that holds because there's some sort of intent. Why are those different? There's a difference between a mistake and something that's malignant, or
the statute proposed applies to medical negligence. There are statutes of limitations for fraud, and in this case, it's 6 years. And so the claim falls within the 6-year period. The stuff was done within 6 years. So the statute proposed does not affect fraud-based claims. Fraud is an intentional tort. Negligence is conceivably not intentional.
And are those statute of limitations different when we're talking about a minor? And shouldn't they be if a minor, because that has such a greater impact on somebody's life if they're not even an adult yet, they're still developing, as opposed to somebody who get a bad hip and they have 20 years left to lose. I know this is kind of morbid, but 20 years left to live.
Yeah, it varies from state to state. Okay, so in some cases, if it was done on a minor, then the minor might have 2 or 3 years after turning 18 to sue. So if the minor was transitioned to 14 or 15, they'll have until they're 20 in some states. Now, states that are enacting these laws that are banning surgeries on minors are also tacking on extended statute of limitations. Some states it's 15 years, some states it's 20 years. And also, if a particular statute of limitation carves out, like, the statute proposed will say, unless otherwise stated by such and such a statute, but you can carve out, you could say the statute proposed doesn't apply. You can legislatively do something like that so that they're not shut down. So just to, again, we may call ourselves a nation of states, but we're a nation of 50 nations when you look at how the laws vary and how the people, Yeah.
So for the sake of the story, how would fraud or conspiracy to commit fraud be proven, or what's basically, how do you assert that this is the case? And how do you think that there is something to stand on with regard to the medicalization of a minor for gender purposes or something like that?
The way the claims are drafted, they will say, because fraud has certain, fraud is a false statement, known to be false, made with the intent to deceive, which does reasonably deceive and causes damage. That's a layman's definition, okay? So what the claims will say is, doctor, you misrepresented to this patient that removal of her healthy breasts would alleviate her mental distress. And endocrinologist, you knew that putting a female on testosterone was not going to cure her mental health issues, and it was going to put her into menopause and cause her all kinds of menopausal side effects like vaginal atrophy, which you didn't really tell her about, or in her mental state, she could not possibly give informed consent to something like that. And you did it with the intent to deceive because you're all profiting from this. This is a very lucrative business for these people. So you made it with the intent to deceive. She reasonably relied upon you to her detriment. And that's how the case proceeds. And so it's going to turn on the facts. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the plaintiff will have to prove it. But right now, as the allegations stand, which is why the court is letting the case proceed, because they've alleged all the right things, everything. And when on a motion to dismiss phase, most courts say, judge, when you're handling this, look at the complaint. And if the allegations, and you construe them as true, and as long as they properly frame the cause of action, you have to let the case proceed and let the facts get developed during the case.
Yeah. So so the malpractice And negligence is covered by insurance. Is fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud covered by, I don't know, consumer, any other sort of insurance? So
I don't think so. I think it depends upon, and I have not seen a lot of medical malpractice policies. And it depends on whether the insurance company believes that this particular claim falls within the meaning of what's called a medical incident. And that's the term that defines whether or not you get coverage under a case. I think we are going to start seeing some coverage disputes between the insurance companies and their insureds, i.e. the doctors, the healthcare providers, psychotherapists. I think that's going to be interesting. It'll take a while, but I think it's going to happen.
okay. And sorry to try to absorb as much as possible here, but if the doctors aren't covered by insurance, then how does that change the shape of these suits?
It's $1 out of the doctor's pocket.
So including their defense, they would have to hire a different lawyer.
Yes. Yeah. Unless they're willing to pay. But most medical malpractice defense lawyers are retained by insurance companies. They're handpicked by insurance companies, and that's who they work for. And so now some insurance companies may decide to defend under what's called a reservation of rights. And with that, what that means is that the insurance company will say to its insured, hey, look, I'm not sure this fits under my policy. I am going to defend you, but I reserve the right to pull out of the defense at any time. And I reserve the right not to indemnify you, which means I reserve the right not to pay a judgment that's entered against you. So understand that, policyholder, that that's the way it is. And in some states where an insurance company says some claims are covered, some claims are not covered, sometimes the insurer will pay part of the defense, but the doctor will have to go out and hire their own attorney anyway for the claims that are potentially not covered under the policy. Because if that insurance company's lawyer pulls out, that doctor is just left there after the case has progressed maybe 2 or 3 years with no defense. And how do you start over with another defense attorney when the case is maybe, a few months from trial? So it could be expensive for the doctor from that angle as well, if there's a defense under reservation of rights. And if any state says to the insurance company, when you do that, you have to tell them they have the right to get their own lawyer on top of that.
Okay.
So wouldn't it be lovely if these things began happening, and wouldn't it make doctors a lot more cautious, and wouldn't it make this entire field of practice much less attractive? And that is where I think we need to be going. I would love for physicians, these doctors, to begin feeling a very deep sense of foreboding. I want them to be looking at their young patients, wondering if this is the one who's going to sue them for millions of dollars. I want them to lie awake at night worrying about getting sued. I want them to be afraid. They should be, because they are hurting people.
If to go back, just for sake of argument, devil's advocate style, if the doctor's being accused of committing fraud, but the doctor says, no, this isn't fraud. I didn't intend to harm you. I was told by the standards of care or by my medical association that this is the proper way to treat this. And then they show all the documents. Can they kick the can up somewhere else? And then does it bang around in these like the Spider-Man meme where everybody's blaming everybody for wherever these standards of care came from?
They could try that. And I think from a plaintiff standpoint, that would be quite the carnival, because defendants typically don't want to fight each other in front of the plaintiff. Mm-hmm. So if one defendant throws another defendant out under the bus, the plaintiff's lawyer is just going to sit back and let the games begin, so to speak. And, but I would say even to a plastic surgeon, you knew that she had mental health issues. She told you she had mental health issues. And you said this was going to fix those mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And you didn't even bother trying to figure out whether maybe somebody should look at the mental health issues, like the doctors in the WPATH files are actually starting to recognize, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be tough as I said, if they want to throw another defendant, if they want to say, well, that psychotherapist is the one who said that this was okay and wrote the letter, now you're shooting at each other. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Which makes it a very unstable situation for the defendants.
Right. I'm going to give you an example of something where plastic surgeon, the industry recognizes that there's a problem, and that's with young girls who want nose jobs. Okay. It's all of a sudden, no girl going through puberty is happy about it. Okay. And so they see somebody who got a nose job because the plastic surgeon had it on his or her website. This is what I can do for you. And so the girl wants to come in and get a nose job when she doesn't need the nose job. And so the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, actually, they have ethical canons, but they also, some of their own members have said it is unethical to market that kind of surgery to minors. Right?
Oh.
I don't see this as being very much different than that. I really don't.
Wow.
Minors are not mentally capable of making such an irreversible decision, and it may not be necessary surgery. So, and you've got a mentally unwell person who's struggling, and you're telling them that this is going to take care of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know for a fact that on YouTube, which is where I make some portion of my ad revenue, and specifically, ironically, during the detransition interviews, that will show marketing that leads people to get access to hormones. Like, well, we'll take care. You can call in, you get your gender certificate, we'll get you the hormones. That seems odd that this controlled substance is just being marketed. That seems another vector of attack, but very kind of different than what you're talking about. But just like cigarette companies were eventually mandated they can't advertise in certain ways.
Yeah.
I heard a Planned Parenthood person call it vitamin T.
Yeah.
Mm.
Vitamin T, like it's just natural. And I would say that if you plop an informed consent document in front of a 17-year-old girl who is very eager to get testosterone, and you say, read this through and sign it, and then you get your testosterone, and you don't sit down with her and say, okay, do you understand what all this means? Here's some pictures. Here's what can actually happen. You need to think it through carefully. That's not what happens. I have a copy of the form, the consent form. It's very brief. It's one page. Nothing is explained. It just, for example, it just says vaginal atrophy. What does vaginal atrophy mean to a 17-year-old? Do you know what it is?
It just kind of turns into a raisin and falls out. You don't have to worry about it. Your average,
your average adult person doesn't know what vaginal atrophy is.
Well, I'm going to even get more graphic. Clitoral enlargement.
Clitoral enlargement.
Girl.
And that's actually put as a benefit. And it's extremely painful and it's permanent. So they are not actually counseled with the reality of any of these. They're not even possibilities, they're certainties. They're not sat down and said, this is they're just given the form, sign the form. You're out the door with your testosterone within 30, 45 minutes. We know this is true. It's documented. It's one visit with a nurse practitioner, one form, and that's it.
Yeah, underage.
So I can tell you they're not being thoroughly informed. That is not informed consent. That's CYA for the clinic. That's all that is.
This is a side note, and I've spoken kind of briefly with Carrie Mendoza about this, but Planned Parenthood seems to kind of already operate within like a gray zone, or like is very robustly defended by the law. And it seems, are you guys aware of any particular like aegis or defense that they have against being sued, or if they can be sued? Because I know that when abortions go awry, they just kind of send the girl down to the emergency clinic and don't have to worry about any of the cleanup, and then the hospital eats the bill. Like there's some weird kind of stuff with Planned Parenthood, and they're also they receive a lot of money and a lot of political power via the abortion debate, and they've gone from providing abortions to now providing this kind of sterilization care, basically some sort of really odd eugenics project, to get a little kind of conspiratorial.
I'm glad you used that word, Ben, because I wrote them a letter 3 years ago and said, you're not getting another nickel out of me because you have returned to your eugenic roots.
Okay. Yeah. So you're aware of this. I'm wondering if you see them being vulnerable in any way.
I don't know. And I'll have to ask Carrie about that because I'm not familiar enough with
Okay.
Planned Parenthood to know whether there's some kind of protection. There is, I could tell you that when it comes to the prescription of drugs off label, there is a level of protection for the pharmaceutical companies that make them so that, there's no liability because the FDA has just been so decimated over the last 50 years by the pharmaceutical industry that they're getting away with anybody prescribing. So it's a hands-off from the pharmaceutical company. I have nothing to do with it. They're doing it off label. And that's where most of the money is. I think ultimately we're going to turn the guns on the pharmaceutical industry like we did with opioids. All right. That I see as the second wave of lawsuits.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's another aspect, but that's a whole other thing. So right now you guys are concentrating on supporting detransitioners individually.
Correct.
And so that's what your project is about specifically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And as you can see, it's a difficult and very fraught project. And so that's why we really feel strongly that support for attorneys is needed. And so I think it's an exciting idea to me that we can bring people together because this is so difficult that it can't be done by one group of attorneys or by one person. This is going to take a very concentrated, very coordinated, very large effort. And so we're going to need the participation of people, all kinds of people. And so we're looking for several different kinds of people at Themis. As Kathleen mentioned, we've been reaching out to attorneys and we are actively looking for attorneys that want to represent Detrans clients. And we have a listing on our website, which is themisresourcefund.org. And we have a small listing so far, but we're hoping to enlarge it. We have a small listing of attorneys who want to represent these clients. We have met with each one of these groups individually, personally, with our board and spoken with them about their vision for how they want to help clients. And we feel that we can back and support them. And then we're also working with the Detrans clients themselves. And part of what we do is we help them connect to attorneys, but then we also help them understand the process a little bit. And we're very concerned that these people do not get re-victimized or re-traumatized by the legal process when they've already been through so much. And so the way that our grants work at Themis is that the attorney and the client concurrently apply for a grant. And our grants can be pretty big. We've been giving some very large grants, and we're able to do that. I'm really grateful for that. But so the application consists both of information about the attorney, what their plan is, and whether they have basically what is your plan and are you able to do it? So we want to see that this attorney is actually able to pursue this case. And then we also have a portion for the detransition client to fill out. And we're most concerned that they understand what they're getting into and they have a robust support system and that they're going to be able to see this through and that they have a realistic idea, that they're not going to have this vision that, I'm going to go to court and the attorney's going to sue and then I'm going to get a judgment. And it may not go that way. It may take a long time and success is a long way from guaranteed, but we're trying. And that's all we can do is try. If we don't try, we're never going to get anywhere. But we just want to make sure that we're helping the Detrans plaintiffs in their process and that they're not being harmed again. And we don't want anybody to be opportunistic with these people.
Yeah.
And then the last category of people that we're looking for is the category of everyone who cares about this issue, because we need funding and we need lots of it, and we need people to send us money. I mean, I'm just going to be really open about it. We have funding, but we're going to need more. These cases are going to cost 6 digits just to bring to court. And so we're going to need a lot of people to send us what they can. And so on our website,
Lynn, we're tax exempt. We're tax
exempt. Yes, we are 501c3 tax exempt organization, and all of our donations are completely tax exempt with the IRS. So we're looking for that. Now, if you go to our website, again, one of the neat things that I love about it is that you can find all of the active cases that are currently going through in the U.S. You can download the complaint on there. You can see the complaint. You can see all of the cases. So that's kind of a little bit of a small picture of how we're working.
One quick law ball question. Again, this process just fascinates me. I don't know anything about it. Is the statute of limitations locked down when the suit starts, so that the date of the suit is how they calculate the statute of limitations?
Right, that's it.
Because it's going to take a lot of years, so you're probably going to be out of...
Right. As long as you file within the statutory period, you're good to go.
And one other category of person that we mentioned, but I don't hear you, Lynn, mention in who you're looking for, is the experts. I'm wondering, is it difficult for experts to want to step up? Is there reputational concerns that experts have, or is there, on the opposite end, some glory to be had in being like that groundbreaking, breaker of this ground?
That's an excellent question, because when I was in private practice, I would have to make sure that my expert did not write anything that was contrary to the opinion that I was seeking from that expert. So some experts may be hesitant because maybe 5-10 years ago, they wrote something that could be seen as inconsistent with the position they're taking. So that there's some hesitancy on that side. On the other side of that, some experts don't want to be subjected to the grueling deposition time. They don't want to be shredded by good defense lawyers. So they would rather act as consultants. So they'll be behind the scenes. They're expensive too. They're consultants. They'll help you get through the litigation. They'll give you some ideas. Maybe they'll help you find an expert. So they can lend their expertise. But when they are a consultant, usually the lawyer does not have to reveal that to the other side. So you may be able to get an expert to function as a consultant, which is all to the good as well, as far as I'm concerned.
And that is another network that needs to be formed in order for these cases. And those experts can go from one state to another. Generally speaking, I guess there's probably like differences from one state, but the science should be kind of uniform.
Yes. So we need experts, and we also need people that can just read medical records, do medical records reviews. We funded a medical records review for a client, and we have funded experts as well, just to write a report. I think we had to pay $6,000 for a report recently. So it's expensive, but it has to be done.
There's a lot of different organizations in this particular space, and this space it's like we've just been talking about. There's really no precedent, and it's so much particularity from one case to another. But when we talk about support, there are support, like GenSpect is working to provide support for detransitioners. And so they're connected to therapy and support. And so I could see that you guys be working in, not conjunction, I'm not saying that, because I don't know how all these 501c3s get along or don't get along or anything like that for legal reasons or personal reasons. But what Themis is carving out is something that's specifically designed to facilitate the lawfare aspect.
Yes, we're supporting litigation, and we are also under the GenSpect umbrella. As a matter of fact, our email address is themis@genspect.org. So GenSpect actually acts as an umbrella for quite a few projects. One of them is Beyond Trans. They also they're sort of an umbrella for the PIT project. So
That's parents with inconvenient truths about trans.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we work closely with GenSpect, and I think it's going to take a lot of teamwork to make any headway here.
Right. We know we may not win every case. This is the first wave. All right.
Mhm.
So, these brave folks that are stepping up to do it know that they may not win. We try to let them understand that. But I think even one win, maybe two, you're going to see more people clamoring to get on board.
Okay.
To do this.
Well, then we're not going to need to fund it anymore. As soon as there's judgments and there's money coming out, I think our job will be done. I think if we win a couple, we're going to be good.
You guys are just trying to get the blood in the water, and then the piranhas will take care of the rest.
Yes.
There you go.
Get out the chum.
I told you at the beginning they won't listen. This is the only way we can get them to listen. We've been trying and trying and trying to play nicely with these people, to write articles, to do studies, to send them letters, to send them petitions. How many petitions and letters and articles and videos have been made and sent to the people who will not listen to us, who have the authority to change the narrative, and they won't do it. And I for me personally, I don't really care for lawyers. I don't like the idea of having to sue people.
Ouch.
I know. Sorry.
This is the juicy part of the conversation. Let's get in here. Little kayfabe.
I'm used to it.
I wish there was another way. I do. I wish that information and letters and petitions and pleas and meetings would work to convince these people and help them to open up their ears and hear that. I don't know where they're getting their ideology, but some of us have paid personal costs. These are real people getting hurt, real families and real people. And it makes me so incredibly angry that they refuse to listen to reason, that they have already made up their mind. And meanwhile, people are getting hurt. And so I do believe the only way to stop it is through litigation.
Is Themis the goddess of vengeance by any chance?
Yes, she's the goddess of justice. She's where we got the scales and the sword.
Yes. Okay.
Right. But if you look at it, we're TRF, okay? TERF, okay?
I like that part of it too. So I have to give credit to my dear friend Alistair Gunn, because he's the one that suggested it, and also drew our beautiful logo in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a talented
man.
man.
Alistair's a genius. So.
Yeah. So I would be remiss to not mention that your group has been very generous to support me in embarking on a new project myself that's tied to my YouTube, but it's taking all of my detransitioner interviews, which I believe there's around 75 to 80 of them, turning them into, well, not all of them, but taking that, transcribing it, and turning it into a book that will be distributed and to act as another piece of information, but hopefully to bring the spirit and the personalities and bring it home that these aren't just statistics. These are real people with really complex stories, and they all come from different vectors, and they're all being changed profoundly by this medical practice, whether it's malpractice or not legally at this point, or can be proven to be the case. But so I want to mention that because that's part of why we're working together. But I also wanted to also support that you guys' core mission is the legal aspect of this.
Yes. And when the idea first was floated, and we talked about it a little bit, and initially I was a little bit hesitant because I really believe that if you're going to get something done, you're going to have to find a small, attainable goal. And granted, as we've just explained in this entire interview, this is not really a small attainable goal. This is enormous, but it's big enough as it is. And so, for example, I was asked, well, can you help in Canada? I think we really need to stick with the US. I think we need to fix our eyes on a goal, and then we need to try not to be,
Mm.
I've had people contact me, parents, and say, can you help me as a parent to sue? And I'm like, we can't do everything.
Right.
And so initially I was kind of like, well, I don't know. Like we weren't really thinking that that's what we were going to do when we formulated the organization. But I think that your project is so in line with what we are trying to do. And so I'm really excited to partner with you on it. And so I do want to explain a little bit, and I think this is a really important piece. So a lot of people have very generously donated to Themis in order to support litigation. And so I just want to be really clear that this is a completely separate project. And so we want to financially give people a opportunity to support you and in a way that's tax deductible and doesn't involve something like Give, Send, Go, where they can yank it out at the last minute and cancel you, which happens all the time. I can't deal with those
Especially
people.
in this, for some reason, in this topic.
Yeah. No, I want to give to that. I don't know why they think that they need to police what we want to support, but I think that your project is really important and valuable, and I want to help it happen. But we have a separate campaign funding mechanism. If you go to our website, it's not on there yet, but I'm talking to my web developer to get it on there. But we're going to have we have our regular donate button where you're supporting litigation. We're going to have a completely separate place where you can donate to this particular project. So I just want to be really clear that none of the funds that have been donated to Themis for the cause of detrans litigation will be used for this project. This is completely separate.
Mm-hmm. And also, Benjamin, I think that I agree with Lynn that your project is in alignment with our mission, because as an attorney, I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to share it with other attorneys in the hopes that maybe if they see this, they may see, okay, there's enough of a need for us to step up to the plate, and we're willing to do it. So I thank you for taking the laboring oar on that.
Thank you very much. I could just turn my channel into Detrans stories, like my YouTube channel, and probably do one a week.
Yeah.
So there are so many stories, there's so many people. I've been really gifted to be able to just speak openly and honestly without much of what's it called when you have an agenda? Yeah, without much of an agenda, just to hear their stories. So I've contacted this community that's huge, and it's really is an underserved community.
In every way they're underserved. Yeah. And to me, one person being harmed this way would be too many.
Yeah.
How many is too many?
Yeah.
That is a great place to end it. I will link all the links in the description. Do you guys have anything else to plug or any insights else that you want to float to the audience at this time?
No, thank you for giving us.
Yeah, I just would encourage everyone to visit our website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be
all right.
Linked right there. Boom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.